I'm Admiral Pauline Grayson, 48 years old, and I built my career from the ground up, one of the youngest flag officers in the U.S. Navy. For years, I showed up for my family, funding trips home, calling between deployments, standing quietly while they celebrated my brother's every win. But when they mocked me at his SEAL ceremony, laughed that I'd never really served, I made a choice that changed everything. Have you ever been dismissed by the people who should have been proud of you? If so, tell me your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I get into what happened, let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had to stand tall when others doubted your worth, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about boundaries, respect, and reclaiming your power. What happened next might surprise you. The dining room was quiet except for the sound of silverware on china. I sat at my parents' table, home on leave for the first time in 8 months, and watched my mother serve pot roast like it was a ceremony. She placed the largest portion in front of my brother Ethan, who grinned and thanked her. My father poured wine, filled Ethan's glass to the rim, then splashed barely an inch into mine. "So, Ethan," Dad said, leaning forward with that look he got when he was proud. "How's the training going?" Ethan shrugged, but he was smiling. "Tough. But I'm loving it. Bud/S is no joke." "Of course it isn't," Mom said, beaming. "You're going to be a SEAL. A real hero." I cut into my pot roast. It was dry. "And you, Pauline?" Dad asked, almost as an afterthought. "Still doing the what is it you do again?" "Operations coordination," I said evenly. "Fleet logistics and strategic planning." "Right." He nodded, but his eyes had already drifted back to Ethan. "That's good. Important work, I'm sure." Mom set down her fork. "At least Ethan's serving for real," she said. "Out there in the field, you know? Actually doing something." Ethan looked uncomfortable. "Mom, I'm just saying," she continued, "it's different. Your sister has a nice job, I'm sure, but you're going to be out there saving lives." Dad raised his glass. "Yeah, not just sitting behind a desk somewhere." I didn't correct them. I could have. I could have told them about the Bronze Star I received after coordinating a carrier strike group during a crisis in the South China Sea. I could have mentioned the Navy Distinguished Service Medal sitting in a safe deposit box because I couldn't bring it home without explaining classified operations. I could have said that my desk job involved decisions that affected thousands of sailors and millions of dollars in assets. Instead, I took a sip of wine and said nothing. This was how it had always been. Ethan was the golden child, charming, athletic, the one who made everything look easy. I was the quiet one, the one who studied too much, the one who didn't quite fit into the family narrative my parents had written. When I got into the Naval Academy, Mom said, "That's nice, honey." When Ethan made varsity football, they drove 6 hours to watch him ride the bench. When I was commissioned as an ensign, they sent a card. When Ethan got his first girlfriend, they threw a barbecue. The pattern was old and familiar, worn smooth by repetition. "How long are you home for?" Ethan asked. 3 days, I said. "Then back to Pearl." "Hawaii," Dad said, shaking his head. "Must be nice." "It's work," I replied. "Sure, but it's not like you're in a combat zone or anything." He gestured at Ethan with his fork. "Not like what this one's going to be doing." Ethan shifted in his seat. "Pauline's job is important too, Dad." "Of course it is," Mom said quickly. "We're proud of both of you. It's just, well, what Ethan's doing is more visible, isn't it? More direct." I finished my pot roast and declined seconds. After dinner, I helped Mom with the dishes while Ethan and Dad watched a game in the living room. The sound of their laughter drifted into the kitchen, easy and unforced. "You know we love you," Mom said, handing me a plate to dry. "I know. It's just that Ethan's doing something so extraordinary. You understand." I dried the plate carefully, set it in the cupboard. "I understand." What I understood was this. My parents had decided long ago who I was and what I was worth. Nothing I did would change that narrative. Not my rank, not my service record, not the years I'd spent commanding sailors and making decisions that kept them alive. To them, I would always be the daughter who didn't quite measure up to their son. I went to bed early that night, in my childhood room with its faded wallpaper and participation trophies from sports I'd never been good at. Through the wall, I could hear Ethan on the phone with his girlfriend, his voice warm and relaxed. I lay in the dark and thought about my command staff back in Hawaii, the men and women who respected my judgment, who trusted me with their lives and careers. I thought about Commander Sandra Cruz, my executive officer, who'd told me last week that I was the best CO she'd ever served under. Then I thought about my mother saying, "At least Ethan's serving for real." The ceiling had a water stain in the corner that looked like a bird. I'd spent a lot of nights in this room staring at that stain, wondering what was wrong with me, why I couldn't make my parents see me the way they saw Ethan. I didn't wonder anymore. I knew the answer. Nothing was wrong with me. The problem wasn't mine to solve. But knowing that didn't make it hurt less. The next morning, over breakfast, Dad mentioned that Ethan's seal ceremony was coming up in a few months. "You should come," Ethan said. "If you can get leave." "I'll try," I said. "It would mean a lot," he added, and I could tell he meant it. Ethan wasn't the problem. He never had been. He didn't ask to be the favorite, didn't encourage our parents' blindness. If anything, he seemed embarrassed by it sometimes, though not enough to challenge it directly. "The whole family will be there," Mom said. "It's going to be such a special day." "I'm sure it will be," I said. Dad looked at me over his newspaper. "You could wear your uniform. Dress it up a bit." I could, I agreed. What I didn't say, I would be wearing my uniform. My service dress blues, with the ribbons and insignia that told the story my parents had never bothered to read. The uniform of a Rear Admiral Lower Half, 07, one of the youngest flag officers in the Navy. But they wouldn't see it. They never did. I finished my coffee and excused myself. I had a video conference with my staff in 2 hours, and I needed to find somewhere quiet with decent internet. As I set up my laptop in the spare bedroom, I heard my parents in the kitchen, their voices carrying. "She seems tired," Mom said. "Desk work will do that," Dad replied. I opened my laptop and logged into the secure network. My screen filled with the faces of my command staff, serious, professional, waiting for my direction. "Good morning, Admiral," Commander Cruz said. "Good morning," I replied. "Let's get started." For the next 90 minutes, I was in my element. We discussed fleet readiness, personnel deployments, equipment maintenance schedules. I made decisions, gave orders, solved problems. My staff listened, took notes, asked smart questions. When we finished, Cruz said, "Thank you, ma'am. Enjoy the rest of your leave." "Thank you, Commander." I closed the laptop and sat in the silence of the spare bedroom. Downstairs, I could hear my parents laughing with Ethan about something. I'd spent my entire career proving myself to people who took me seriously. Chiefs and captains, admirals and enlisted sailors, they saw my competence, respected my authority, trusted my leadership. But I'd never stopped trying to prove myself to the 2 people who refused to look. 3 days later, I flew back to Hawaii. My parents drove me to the airport. In the rearview mirror, I watched my father's eyes as he talked about Ethan's training, Mom nodding along. At the curb, they hugged me goodbye. "We'll see you at Ethan's ceremony," Mom said. "I'll be there," I promised. I would be. Not as their daughter, not as Ethan's sister, but as myself. As Admiral Pauline Grayson. And this time, they would finally see me. The ceremony was held at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado on a bright September morning. I arrived in my service dress blues, the gold stripe on my sleeve catching sunlight, but nobody was looking at me. The parking lot was full of families clutching programs and cameras, all here to watch young men become SEALs. I found my parents near the front of the crowd. Mom wore a navy dress and had brought 2 bouquets. Dad had on his best suit, the one he saved for weddings and funerals. They were beaming, locked in conversation with another couple, probably another SEAL's parents. "Pauline," Mom said when she saw me. She kissed my cheek, distracted. "You made it. Good. We saved you a seat." The seat was on the end of the row, with a good view of nothing. "This is so exciting," Mom continued, gripping my arm. "Our son, a Navy SEAL. Can you imagine?" "It's quite an achievement," I said. Dad barely looked at me. His eyes were scanning the crowd for Ethan, who was somewhere with his class, preparing for the ceremony. We took our seats. The chairs were arranged in rows facing a platform where the trident pins would be presented. Behind the platform, The ocean stretched out blue and endless, the same ocean I'd spent my career defending. This, Mom said to the woman next to her, gesturing broadly, is what real service looks like. My son's a warrior. I folded my hands in my lap and watched the platform. At exactly 1000 hours, the ceremony began. The SEAL candidates marched in formation, crisp and disciplined, their faces hard with pride and exhaustion. Ethan was in the third row, his eyes forward, his bearing perfect. The base commander spoke first, talking about sacrifice and brotherhood, about the standards and selection process that made SEALs the elite. Then he introduced Lieutenant General Robert Miller, who'd come from SOCOM to present the awards. Miller took the platform. He was in his mid-50s, ramrod straight, with close-cropped gray hair and ribbons covering half his chest. He spoke about the importance of special operations, about the men who volunteered to do the hardest jobs in the hardest conditions. I'd met Miller twice before. Once at a joint operations brief in Tampa, and once at a reception following a change of command. Both times, he'd been professional and sharp, the kind of officer who didn't waste words. His speech was good, measured, respectful, inspiring in the way military speeches should be. He was talking about the global reach of naval special warfare when his eyes swept the crowd and landed on me. He stopped mid-sentence. For a moment, he just stared. Then he glanced down at his notes, back up at me, and his expression shifted into something like surprise. The crowd began to murmur. People noticed the pause, noticed him looking. Miller stepped away from the microphone, said something to the base commander beside him, then walked down from the platform. He walked straight toward me. The murmuring grew louder. My parents looked confused. Dad leaned over. What's going on? I didn't answer. I stood, because that's what you do when a 3-star general is walking toward you with purpose. Miller stopped 3 feet away and saluted. Admiral Grayson, he said clearly, his voice carrying. It's an honor to have you here, ma'am. The crowd went silent. I returned the salute. General. Around me, people were standing. The officers in the crowd came to attention. I saw Ethan in formation, his eyes wide, his hand snapping up in salute. The other SEAL candidates followed, the entire formation saluting toward me. My parents sat frozen, their faces blank with shock. Miller held my eyes for a moment, nodded once, then returned to the platform. Ladies and gentlemen, he said into the microphone, we have the distinct honor of having Rear Admiral Pauline Grayson in attendance today. Admiral Grayson commands the Pacific Fleet's Logistics and Operations Group and has served with extraordinary distinction for over 25 years. Her presence here honors these men and this ceremony. The crowd applauded. It wasn't polite applause. It was sustained, genuine, the kind of recognition that comes from people who understand what rank means, what it costs. I remained standing until Miller gestured for everyone to sit. Then I lowered myself back into my chair, my posture unchanged, my expression neutral. Next to me, my mother's mouth was open. On my other side, my father stared at me like I was a stranger. I kept my eyes forward. The ceremony continued. The SEAL pins were presented, each candidate stepping forward to receive their trident. When Ethan's name was called, he walked to the platform with precision, shook Miller's hand, received his pin. Mom cried. Dad's hands shook as he held his camera. I watched my brother become a SEAL and felt genuinely proud of him. His achievement was real. He'd earned this. But the looks on my parents' faces, the shock, the confusion, the dawning realization, that was for me. After the ceremony, families flooded toward their sailors. My parents moved toward Ethan, but slowly, their steps uncertain. I stayed back, letting them have their moment. Commander Cruz appeared at my elbow. She was in town for a logistics conference and had come to the ceremony as a courtesy. Nice entrance, Admiral, she said quietly. I didn't plan it. I know. That's what makes it perfect. She drifted away as my parents approached. Ethan was with them, his new trident pinned to his chest, his expression somewhere between pride and concern. Pauline, Dad said. His voice cracked. You're an admiral? Yes. Why didn't you tell us? Mom asked. Her eyes were red. I did, I said calmly. Several times. You didn't ask for details. Ethan looked at me, then at our parents. I told you she was high-ranking. I said she was important. You said she worked in logistics, Dad said weakly. I command logistics operations for the entire Pacific Fleet, I said. It's a flag officer billet. Mom reached for my arm, but I stepped back slightly, not rudely, just enough. You've been an admiral this whole time? For 3 years. Before that, I was a captain for 6 years. Before that, commander. You were at my promotion ceremony when I made lieutenant commander. You left early. I watched the memory surface in their faces, watched them reconstruct years of casual dismissals and forgotten milestones. We didn't know, Dad said. You didn't ask. Ethan cleared his throat. I need to check in with my class. Pauline, can we talk later? Of course. Congratulations, Ethan. You earned this. He nodded, squeezed my shoulder, and left. Around us, families were taking photos, laughing, celebrating. My parents stood in the middle of it all, looking lost. We're sorry, Mom said finally. I know. We should have, yes, I interrupted gently. You should have. Dad tried again. We're proud of you. We are. We just didn't know what I did, I finished. Didn't think it mattered. Didn't see it as real service. They flinched. I didn't soften my tone, but I didn't harden it either. I just stated facts, the way I would in a briefing. I have to leave soon, I said. I have a transport back to Pearl at 1400 hours. Already? Mom asked. I took leave to be here. Now I need to get back to work. Can we see you off? Dad asked. That's not necessary. I started to walk away, then paused and turned back. For what it's worth, Ethan's achievement today is real. Be proud of him. He deserves it. Then I left them standing there, two people who'd just discovered they'd been blind for 30 years. I walked across the base toward the flight line, my shoes crisp on the pavement, my uniform immaculate in the California sun. Behind me, I heard my mother crying. I didn't look back. I grew up invisible. Not neglected, not abused, just unseen in the specific way that happens when a family has already decided who matters most. Ethan was 3 years younger than me, born after our parents had spent my early childhood hoping for a son. When he finally arrived, their world reoriented around him like planets around the sun. I was 7 when he was born. I remember holding him in the hospital, this tiny red-faced thing, and feeling something shift in the room. The way Mom looked at him was different from how she'd ever looked at me. Softer. More complete. Dad had wanted a son to play catch with, to teach about cars and sports, to carry on the family name in the way that mattered to him. I'd tried to be that kid. I played Little League, earned badges in Girl Scouts, brought home straight A's. None of it was enough, because none of it was what he'd wanted. When Ethan got old enough to throw a ball, Dad spent every weekend in the yard with him. When I asked to join, he'd say, "This is brother time, Pauline. Maybe later." Later never came. I learned early to stop asking for attention and started working for achievement instead. If I couldn't be their favorite, I'd be their best. I studied harder, performed better, won more awards. My bedroom shelf filled with academic trophies and certificates of excellence. Mom would glance at them and say, "That's nice, honey," then go downstairs to watch Ethan's soccer practice. High school was more of the same. I was valedictorian. Ethan was homecoming king. Guess which one got the bigger party? I applied to the Naval Academy because I wanted structure, discipline, something that measured worth objectively. The academy didn't care that I was quiet or studious or not as charismatic as my brother. It cared about performance, about meeting standards, about excellence you could quantify. I thrived there. Plebe year nearly broke me. It breaks everyone, but I came out stronger. I made it through on discipline and stubbornness, the same qualities that had gotten me through childhood. By graduation, I was ranked in the top 10% of my class. Mom and Dad came to my commissioning. They sat in the crowd at Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium and watched me receive my ensign bars. Afterward, Dad shook my hand and said, "We're proud of you." Then he checked his watch and said they needed to get back for Ethan's baseball tournament. I was 22. Ensign Pauline Grayson, United States Navy. And I was still invisible to them. My first assignment was aboard a destroyer as a division officer. I learned how to lead sailors, how to stand watch, how to make decisions when lives and equipment depended on getting it right. I was good at it. My fitness reports reflected that. I made lieutenant junior grade on time, then full lieutenant ahead of schedule. When I called home to tell them about my promotion to lieutenant, Mom said, "That's wonderful, honey. Did you hear Ethan got into state? Full scholarship for football." I served at sea, then ashore, then at sea again. I did a tour with the Pacific Fleet staff, another on a cruiser, a stint at the Naval Postgraduate School. I made lieutenant commander at 31, younger than average, and took command of a logistics support unit in Japan. I called to tell them. Dad said, "Commander, huh? Is that good?" "It's the rank before captain," I explained. "Oh. Well, good for you." Ethan just proposed to his girlfriend. We're planning a wedding. I flew home for the wedding. I wore my service dress. Nobody asked about my uniform. Nobody asked about my job. At the reception, I sat at a back table with distant cousins while my parents gave speeches about Ethan and his beautiful bride and their bright future. I left before the cake was cut. At 37, I made captain. 06. It came with command of a logistics squadron and responsibilities spanning multiple bases. I managed hundreds of personnel, millions of dollars in equipment, operations that kept the fleet running. I sent my parents a photo of my promotion ceremony. Mom texted back, "So proud. Ethan's wife is pregnant." That was the year I stopped trying. Not consciously, I didn't make a decision or have an epiphany. I just stopped expecting anything different. Stopped hoping they'd ask about my work. Stopped imagining conversations where they saw me as more than an afterthought to Ethan's accomplishments. I focused on my career instead. I was good at my job, maybe great. My superiors noticed. My fitness reports used words like exceptional and promote ahead of peers. I received a Bronze Star for my role coordinating support during a carrier strike group's deployment to the Persian Gulf. The citation was classified, so I couldn't explain what I'd done, but it involved 72 hours without sleep and decisions that prevented a logistics disaster during critical operations. I put the medal in a safe deposit box. There was no point bringing it home. At 43, I deployed to the South China Sea during a period of heightened tensions. Our carrier group was positioned as a deterrent, and my job was making sure we could sustain operations indefinitely if necessary. It meant coordinating with multiple countries, managing supply chains across thousands of miles, solving problems in real time with incomplete information. We pulled it off. The crisis de-escalated, the carrier group maintained readiness throughout, and I received a Navy Distinguished Service Medal. The admiral who pinned it on said I'd performed at a flag officer level while still wearing captain's eagles. The promotion board agreed. At 45, I was selected for Rear Admiral lower half. 07. Flag rank. The ceremony was held in Pearl Harbor. Commander Cruz read the orders. A 2-star admiral administered the oath. My new shoulder boards gleamed gold on blue. I called my parents that evening. "That's wonderful, honey," Mom said. "We're so happy for you." Listen, Ethan got orders to train for SEAL selection. Can you believe it? I could believe it. Ethan had joined the Navy 2 years earlier, following in my footsteps in the way that people noticed and celebrated. He was strong, athletic, charismatic, everything BUD/S looked for. "Tell him congratulations," I said. "We will." He's so excited. "This is such a big deal." "It is," I agreed. "Your father wants to know, is Admiral higher than Captain?" I closed my eyes. "Yes, Mom. Admiral is higher than Captain." "Oh, how nice. So you got promoted again?" "Yes." "Well, good for you, honey. We're very proud." Now, about Ethan, I let her talk. She told me about his training, his determination, his dreams of becoming a SEAL. She told me how worried she was, how dangerous it would be, how proud they were that he was pushing himself. I listened and said nothing about my own deployments, my own dangers, my own years of pushing myself past limits they'd never bothered to learn about. When I hung up, I stood on my lanai and looked out at the Pacific. Somewhere out there were ships I helped keep supplied, sailors whose lives depended on logistics chains I managed, operations I'd coordinated that prevented conflicts from escalating. My parents knew none of it. They knew I worked in the Navy. They knew I wore a uniform. Beyond that, I was a vague shape in the background of Ethan's more interesting life. 3 years passed. I served as a flag officer, commanded my group, made decisions that affected thousands of people. I worked 70-hour weeks and spent most holidays at sea or on base. I mentored junior officers, counseled struggling sailors, shaped policies that improved readiness across the fleet. And then came the phone call about Ethan's ceremony. "You'll come, won't you?" Mom asked. "It's so important. My son, a Navy SEAL." "I'll be there," I said. I could have told her then. Could have explained exactly who would be sitting in that audience, what rank I held, what my presence might mean. But I'd learned long ago, they didn't ask questions because they didn't want answers. They wanted me to fit into their story, not disrupt it with my own. So I said nothing. I booked leave, arranged transport, and prepared to watch my brother achieve something genuinely impressive while my parents continued not seeing me. I didn't plan what happened. Didn't orchestrate it. Didn't even hope for it. But when Lieutenant General Miller walked off that platform and saluted me in front of everyone, when my parents' faces went pale with shock, when the truth they'd ignored for decades became impossible to deny, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Seen. The flight back to Pearl Harbor gave me 6 hours alone with my thoughts. I sat in the jump seat of AC-130, surrounded by cargo and silence, and replayed the ceremony over and over. My mother's face when Miller saluted. My father's hands shaking. The weight of years of dismissal suddenly made visible in one stark moment. I should have felt vindicated. Triumphant, even. Instead, I felt tired. The plane landed at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam just after 2,200 hours. Commander Cruz met me on the tarmac, even though I'd told her it wasn't necessary. "Admiral," she said, falling into step beside me. "How did it go?" "You were there. You saw." "I saw the ceremony." "I'm asking about after." We walked across the flight line toward base administration. The night air was warm, heavy with the smell of ocean and jet fuel. "They were shocked," I said finally. "Confused." "They apologized." And nothing. I left. Cruz was quiet for a moment. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am?" "Always." That must have been satisfying. I stopped walking and looked at her. Sandra Cruz was 42, a surface warfare officer who'd commanded 2 ships before joining my staff. She was competent, direct, and one of the few people I considered a friend. "It wasn't," I said. "It was just sad." She studied my face. "They really didn't know?" "They knew I was Navy. They knew I had rank. Beyond that, I shrugged. They never asked for details. Never wanted to know." "That's on them, ma'am." "I know. But knowing that doesn't make it feel better." We resumed walking. My office was dark when we reached it, my desk clear except for a stack of reports Cruz had left for me to review. The normal weight of command settling back onto my shoulders. "Get some rest, ma'am," Cruz said. "Tomorrow's going to be busy." She was right. Tomorrow was always busy. I went back to my quarters instead of sleeping. I poured a glass of wine I wouldn't drink and sat on the lanai, looking out at the dark water. Somewhere out there was a carrier strike group I'd helped provision. Somewhere was a sailor whose boots I'd made sure arrived on time. Somewhere were operations running smoothly because of decisions I'd made. My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan, "Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Tomorrow. 0900 your time." He replied immediately. "Thank you." I set the phone down and closed my eyes. The wine sat untouched on the table. I didn't need it. I was already numb enough. At 0530, I was up, dressed, and running my usual route along the base perimeter. 6 miles at a pace that cleared my head and reminded my body it still worked. By 0700, I was showered, in uniform, and at my desk reviewing operational reports. Commander Cruz arrived at 0730 with coffee and an expression that meant we had problems. "Submarine tender in Guam has a parts shortage," she said. "Critical systems. They're projecting 72 hours before they can get back to full capability." "What do they need?" "Pump assemblies. 3 of them." We've got 2 in inventory here, but the third, check with the contractors in San Diego. If they've got 1 manufactured, authorize expedited shipping. Already did. It'll be there by tomorrow evening. Good. What else? We spent the next hour going through logistics issues, personnel problems, and readiness reports. This was my world, concrete problems with measurable solutions, people who respected my judgment, work that mattered in ways I could see and prove. At 0900, I called Ethan. He answered on the first ring. Pauline, you wanted to talk. There was a pause. Background noise suggested he was outside, probably at the base. I wanted to apologize, he said finally, for not doing more. I should have made them understand. This isn't your fault, Ethan. I knew you were high-ranking. I tried to tell them, but they didn't. He stopped. They didn't want to hear it. I know. I'm sorry. I looked out my office window at the harbor, at the gray ships anchored in neat rows. You earned your trident yesterday, I said. That's what matters. Don't let this take away from that. They're devastated, he said quietly. Mom hasn't stopped crying. Dad keeps asking what he missed, how he didn't know. They missed everything, Ethan. Not just about rank. About who I am, what I do, why it matters. They missed 30 years. They want to fix it. Some things can't be fixed. Another pause. Then, what do you want me to tell them? I considered the question. What did I want? An apology? I'd gotten that. An explanation? There wasn't one that would satisfy me. A promise to do better? Too late for that to mean much. Tell them I need time, I said. Tell them I'm not angry, just tired. Okay, I can do that. Congratulations again, Ethan. Being a SEAL is everything you hoped it would be and harder than you can imagine. But you'll be good at it. Thank you. And Pauline? I've always been proud of you. I hope you know that. My throat tightened. I know. We hung up. I sat at my desk and stared at the phone for a moment, then forced myself back to work. The day proceeded in its normal rhythm. Meetings, decisions, problems solved, fires extinguished. At 1300 hours, I briefed a visiting congressional delegation on Pacific Fleet logistics capabilities. At 1500 hours, I reviewed fitness reports for my senior enlisted staff. At 1700 hours, I finally cleared my desk enough to leave. Commander Cruz found me on my way out. Your parents called the command center, she said. I stopped. What? About an hour ago. They asked to speak with you. The watchstander didn't put them through, told them you were in meetings. Good. They asked about your schedule. When you might be available. I rubbed my temples. Tell the watch to be polite but firm. No calls transferred without my approval. Already done. Just thought you should know. Thank you, Sandra. She hesitated. For what it's worth, ma'am, you handled that ceremony with more grace than I would have. I've had practice being overlooked. That shouldn't be something you're good at. She was right. It shouldn't be. That night, I got an email from my mother. The subject line was, "We're so sorry." I stared at it for 10 minutes before opening it. The message was long, emotional, full of explanations and justifications and desperate apologies. She talked about being busy with Ethan, about not understanding military rank, about assuming I would tell them if anything important happened. She said they loved me, had always loved me, were so proud of everything I'd accomplished. At the end, she wrote, "Please come home. Let us make this right." I closed the laptop without responding. The next morning, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. Then he called again. And again. By the afternoon, I had 7 missed calls and 3 voicemails I hadn't listened to. Ethan texted, "They're not handling this well." I replied, "Neither am I. What do you need?" I thought about that. What did I need? Space. Distance. Time to process decades of being unseen by the people who should have seen me first. Nothing right now, I typed. Just time. Okay, I'm here if that changes. 3 days after the ceremony, I received a package at my office. Inside was a framed photo of me at my promotion to Rear Admiral, one I'd sent them years ago. They'd never displayed it. Now it came back to me with a note in my mother's handwriting. "We should have put this on the mantle. We should have celebrated you. We're sorry we didn't." I looked at the photo, me in dress blues, the Admiral's star on my shoulder board, my face composed and professional. The woman in that photo had earned everything she wore. She'd climbed through ranks and proved herself over and over, not for recognition, but because it was who she was. That woman didn't need her parents' approval. But the girl she'd been, the one who'd tried so hard to be seen, still ached with their absence. I put the photo on my desk, facing away from me. Then I got back to work. 3 weeks after the ceremony, my parents stopped calling. The daily voicemails tapered to every other day, then twice a week, then silence. I told myself I was relieved. Mostly, I believed it. Work consumed me the way it always had. I reviewed deployment schedules, authorized equipment transfers, mediated disputes between commands competing for limited resources. Commander Cruz ran the daily operations while I focused on strategic planning and the endless meetings that came with flag rank. At 0700 on a Tuesday, she knocked on my office door with a peculiar expression. "Admiral, you have visitors." I looked up from my reports. "I don't have anything on my calendar." "I know. But they're here anyway." "Who?" "Your parents." I set down my pen carefully. "They're here? On base?" "At the visitor center. They flew in last night, apparently. They're asking to see you." My first instinct was to refuse. Send them away, make them understand that you couldn't ignore someone for 30 years and then demand an audience. But I was an admiral. I didn't hide from difficult conversations. "Bring them to conference room B," I said. "Give me 10 minutes. Cruz nodded and left. I sat alone in my office, breathing steadily, preparing myself the way I would for any challenging negotiation. They were waiting when I arrived. Mom stood by the window overlooking the harbor, her hands clasped in front of her. Dad sat at the conference table, looking older than I remembered. They both turned when I entered, and the hope on their faces was painful to see. "Pauline," Mom said. I closed the door. "You should have called first." "You weren't taking our calls," Dad said. "There's a reason for that." Mom's eyes were red, like she'd been crying recently. "We needed to see you. To talk in person." I remained standing, kept my posture formal. "You have 15 minutes. I have a briefing at 0800. "We've been talking," Dad started. "About everything. About how we treated you, what we missed. And you realize now," I interrupted quietly. "After 30 years. After a general saluted me in public and you had no choice but to see what you'd ignored." "That's not fair," Mom said. "Fair?" I kept my voice level, professional. "I made lieutenant commander at 31. You asked if that was good. I made captain at 37 and sent you a photo of my promotion ceremony. You texted back about Ethan's wife being pregnant. I became an admiral at 45, and you asked if that was higher than captain." Dad flinched. "We didn't understand, you didn't ask. There's a difference." I walked to the window, looked out at the ships. "I spent my entire childhood trying to get you to see me. I brought home perfect grades, won every award my school offered, got into one of the most competitive universities in the country. None of it mattered, because I wasn't Ethan." "We loved you," Mom said, her voice breaking. "I'm sure you did. But love and attention aren't the same thing. Love and respect aren't the same thing. You loved me the way you'd love furniture, present, functional, easy to overlook." "That's not true," Dad protested. I turned to face them. "When was my last promotion?" They looked at each other, uncertain. "When was my last deployment? What ship was I stationed on before I came to Pearl? What does my job actually entail?" I paused. "You can't answer any of those questions, can you?" Silence. "But you can tell me about Ethan's Bud/S training. About his girlfriend, his wedding, his hopes for special operations. You know everything about his life because you paid attention to it." Mom wiped her eyes. "We're here now. We're trying. Trying now. After it became public. After you were embarrassed." "That's not why," Dad started. "Isn't it? If General Miller hadn't recognized me, if that ceremony had gone the way you expected, would you be here? Would you have flown to Hawaii, demanding my time, insisting we fix this?" They didn't answer, which was answer enough. I checked my watch. "You have 5 minutes left. What do you want from us?" Mom asked desperately. "Tell us what to do. Tell us how to make this right. I want you to go home. Pauline, I want you to think about what you missed. Really think about it. Not just my rank, but everything. The nights I stayed up studying while you watched Ethan's games. The awards ceremonies you left early. The deployments I came back from to find you'd barely noticed I was gone. I want you to understand that this isn't about one ceremony or one moment. It's about 30 years of choosing not to see me. Dad's voice was rough. We see you now. Do you? Or do you see a rank that embarrassed you? Do you see an admiral? Or do you see your daughter? Both, he said. Then you're looking at someone you don't know. Because the daughter you remember learned a long time ago to stop expecting anything from you. Mom stepped forward. Don't say that. It's true. I built a career. I commanded sailors. I made decisions that affected thousands of people. I did all of it knowing you'd never understand or appreciate any of it. And I was fine with that. I made peace with it. But we want to understand now, she insisted. Now isn't enough. The words hung in the air between us. Outside the window, a guided missile destroyer was moving through the harbor, sailors on deck preparing to moor. I need time, I said finally. Months, maybe years. I need to figure out what kind of relationship we can have, if any. And I need to do that without you showing up unannounced, making demands, trying to fix something that's been broken for decades. So we just wait? Dad asked. You wait. You think. And maybe, eventually, we can talk. But it happens on my terms, my timeline. Not yours. Mom was crying openly now. We love you. I know. But love isn't enough when it comes with 30 years of blindness. I walked to the door, opened it. Commander Cruz was in the hallway, professional and discreet. Commander, please escort my parents to the visitor center and arrange their transportation off base. Yes, ma'am. I looked at my parents one last time. They seemed smaller, older, diminished by the weight of their own failure. Goodbye, I said. Then I walked away. I made it to my office, closed the door, and stood at the window with my hands braced against the sill. My chest felt tight, my breathing shallow. There was a knock. Cruz entered without waiting for permission. How did you know? I asked without turning. 23 years in the Navy, ma'am. I know what it looks like when someone's barely holding it together. She didn't say anything else, just stood there in silent support. After a moment, my breathing steadied. They meant well, I said. Doesn't mean they did well. No, it doesn't. I straightened, adjusted my uniform, restored the composure that was as much a part of me as the rank on my shoulders. I have a briefing in 10 minutes. I rescheduled it. You have the morning clear. I looked at her. That wasn't necessary. With respect, ma'am, it was. She left me alone. I sat at my desk and stared at the framed photo my mother had sent back, the one of my promotion to Rear Admiral. In it, I looked confident, accomplished, complete. I picked up my phone and texted Ethan. Saw Mom and Dad today. It didn't go well. His response came quickly. I'm sorry. Are you okay? I typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on, I will be. Because I would be. I'd survived 30 years of invisibility. I'd survived this too. The rest of the day proceeded normally. I attended meetings, made decisions, solved problems. Nobody looking at me would have known that anything was wrong, and that was exactly how I needed it to be. That evening, alone in my quarters, I allowed myself exactly 10 minutes of grief. 10 minutes to feel the loss of what could have been, should have been, never was. Then I poured a glass of water, reviewed the next day's schedule, and prepared for sleep. I'd spent my life proving I didn't need their validation. Now I just had to believe it. For months after the ceremony, Ethan called at 0200 hours. I was already awake, insomnia had become a familiar companion, so I answered. Pauline. His voice was rough, exhausted. I need help. I sat up, instantly alert. What's wrong? Are you injured? No. Yes. I don't know. He paused. I'm struggling. Training is, it's harder than I thought. And I can't talk to Mom and Dad about it. Why not? Because they think I'm invincible. They've spent my whole life telling me I'm special, that I can do anything. How do I tell them I'm failing? I walked to the window. Outside, Pearl Harbor was dark and quiet. Are you failing? I asked. I don't know. Maybe. I'm injured, nothing serious, but it's slowing me down. And mentally, I'm exhausted. Everyone here is as good as me or better. I'm not special anymore, and I don't know how to be average. There was something raw in his voice, something I recognized from my own plebe year at the academy. Where are you right now? I asked. Coronado. Outside the barracks. Go inside. Find somewhere private. I'll wait. I heard him moving, heard a door close. Then, okay. Listen to me, I said. What you're feeling is normal. Everyone in selection feels it. The whole point of BUD/S is to push you past what you think you can handle. But what if I can't handle it? Then you can't. And that's not the end of the world. Silence on the other end. Ethan, being a SEAL isn't the only way to serve. It's not the only way to matter. If this isn't for you, that doesn't make you a failure. It makes me less than I was supposed to be. And there it was, the weight of a lifetime of being the golden child, the one who was supposed to succeed at everything. You were supposed to be perfect because Mom and Dad needed you to be, I said quietly. They put that on you the same way they ignored me. Neither of us asked for it, and neither of us deserved it. How did you do it? He asked. How did you keep going when nobody was watching? I thought about that question. How had I done it? What had sustained me through years of being overlooked? I found purpose outside their approval, I said finally. I served because I believed in it, not because anyone was clapping. I led sailors because they needed leadership, not because it would impress my parents. I built a life where my worth wasn't dependent on their recognition. I don't know if I can do that. You can. But first, you have to survive training. So here's what you're going to do. Tomorrow, you're going to see the medical staff about your injury. No pushing through pain, no being a hero. Get it treated properly. That'll put me behind. Better behind than broken. Then you're going to focus on one day at a time. Not the whole program, not what happens after. Just the next day, the next evolution, the next challenge. Okay. And Ethan? If you decide to quit, if you decide this isn't for you, that's okay too. I'll still be proud of you. His voice cracked. You're the only one who would be. Then I'm the only one whose opinion should matter. We talked for another 20 minutes. I gave him practical advice, how to manage injuries, how to deal with instructors, how to stay mentally strong when your body is failing. Advice earned through my own years of pushing past limits. When we hung up, I lay back down but didn't sleep. Instead, I thought about my brother, the golden child who'd carried the weight of our parents' expectations his entire life, who'd never been allowed to be average or uncertain or afraid. Maybe we'd both been damaged, just in different ways. Over the next few months, Ethan called regularly. Sometimes for advice, sometimes just to talk. I became his lifeline through BUD/S, the person who understood what he was enduring without judgment or expectation. He made it through. Barely, and with more struggle than he'd ever admit to our parents, but he made it. I'm going to be a SEAL, he said when he called with the news. I know. I never doubted it. I did. A lot. That's what makes it real, Ethan. Anyone who goes through that program and doesn't doubt themselves is either lying or not human. He was quiet for a moment. Thank you. For everything. I couldn't have done this without you. Yes, you could have. But I'm glad I could help. After we hung up, Commander Cruz found me in my office. Good news? She asked, reading my expression. My brother completed training. The SEAL? Yes. She nodded. That's a real accomplishment. You should be proud. I am. He worked hard for it. So did you, she said. For your rank, I mean. You worked hard too. I looked at her, wondering where this was going. I've been thinking about what happened at that ceremony, she continued. About your parents. And I realized something. What? You spent your whole career becoming someone worthy of respect, someone who earned everything she has. And you did it without recognition or support. That's more impressive than anything your brother accomplished. That's not a competition, Sandra. I know. But sometimes people need to hear that they're remarkable, even if it's not from the people they wanted to hear it from. She left before I could respond. That evening, I received an email from Ethan. The subject line was "Thank you," and the message was simple. You're the best officer I know, and the best sister. I'm sorry it took me so long to say it. I read it 3 times, then filed it in a folder I'd labeled Things That Matter. 2 weeks later, my parents called. I'd been screening their calls for months, but something made me answer this time. Pauline, Mom said. Thank you for taking our call. What do you need? We wanted to tell you something. We've been seeing a therapist. About our family, about how we treated you. We wanted you to know we're trying to understand. I sat down slowly. A therapist? Dr. Morrison. She specializes in family dynamics. We've had 6 sessions so far. Dad's voice joined in. They had me on speaker. She's been helping us see things from your perspective. How our behavior affected you. How we damaged our relationship. That's good, I said carefully. We're not asking for forgiveness, Mom continued. Not yet. We just wanted you to know we're working on ourselves. That we're serious about this. Okay. And we wanted to tell you, we told Ethan about our sessions. We apologized to him too, for putting too much pressure on him, for making him responsible for our pride. That surprised me. How did he take it? Better than we deserved. He said you'd been helping him through training. That you were the one he turned to when things got hard. Dad's voice was thick. You were there for him when we couldn't be. He's my brother. That's what siblings do. We should have been there for both of you, Mom said. Differently, but equally. We failed at that. I didn't argue. There was nothing to argue with. I need to go, I said. I have work. Of course. We wanted you to know. We're trying. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of my office and processed the conversation. They were trying. It didn't fix anything, didn't erase decades of damage, but it was something. Maybe that was enough for now. Commander Cruz knocked and entered. Admiral, we have a situation with the supply chain in Okinawa. Details? Equipment delivery delayed by typhoon. Base commander is requesting alternative sourcing. I pulled up my computer. Let's see what we can do. And just like that, I was back to work. Back to the place where I was competent, respected, valued. Back to the world that made sense. But in a small corner of my mind, something had shifted. My parents were trying. Ethan saw me. And maybe, there was a path forward that didn't require me to choose between my career and my family. It would take time. Years, probably. But I'd spent my whole life being patient. I could be patient a little longer. 7 months after the ceremony, my parents asked if they could visit again. This time, they called first. This time, I said yes. They arrived on a Saturday afternoon, during my rare weekend off. I met them at a restaurant in Honolulu, neutral territory where neither of us had the advantage. Mom looked thinner. Dad's hair had gone completely gray. They both seemed nervous, uncertain how to begin. Thank you for meeting us, Mom said. I nodded. You said you've been working with a therapist. 6 months now, Dad confirmed. Twice a month. Dr. Morrison has been enlightening. How so? Mom folded her hands on the table. She helped us understand that we weren't just neglecting you. We were actively choosing not to see you. There's a difference. I know there is. We were so focused on Ethan, Dad continued, on making sure he succeeded, that we convinced ourselves you didn't need us. You were smart, capable, independent. We told ourselves you were fine. I was fine, I said. But I shouldn't have had to be. No, Mom agreed. You shouldn't have. And we're sorry. Truly, deeply sorry for what we put you through. The apology was better than before. More considered, less desperate. But I'd learned that apologies were easy. Change was hard. What are you going to do differently? I asked. They looked at each other, and I saw something I hadn't seen before, real uncertainty, real recognition of failure. We want to know you, Dad said. Not who we thought you were, but who you actually are. What your life is like, what your work means, what matters to you. That's going to take time. We know. We're prepared for that. Mom pulled out a small notebook. I've been learning about Navy rank structure. About what a rear admiral does, what your responsibilities are. I don't understand all of it yet, but I'm trying. I looked at the notebook. It was filled with her handwriting, notes, questions, diagrams of rank hierarchy. Dad's been reading about Pacific Fleet operations, she continued. About logistics and supply chains. He didn't know that's what you do, that you keep the entire fleet running. It's impressive, Dad added. What you've built. The scope of your command. When I think about what you manage every day, he shook his head. I'm amazed. And ashamed that I didn't know. The waiter came, took our orders, left. We sat in silence for a moment. Ethan talks about you differently now, Mom said. He told us you helped him through BUD/S. That he wouldn't have made it without you. He would have. He's tougher than he thinks. He said you told him it's okay to fail. That it's okay to be average. I smiled slightly. He needed to hear that. We never told him that, Dad said quietly. We put too much pressure on him. Made him feel like he had to be perfect. You put pressure on both of us. Just different kinds. Mom nodded. Dr. Morrison said we set Ethan up to feel like he always had to succeed, and we set you up to feel like nothing you did mattered. We damaged both of you. Yes, I said simply. You did. The acknowledgement hung between us, not angry, not accusatory, just true. Our food arrived. We ate in careful silence, testing the boundaries of this new dynamic. We'd like to visit again, Mom said eventually. If that's all right. Maybe once a month? We could learn about your work, your life here. No pressure, no expectations. Just time together. I considered the request. Part of me wanted to refuse, to maintain the distance I'd built. But another part, smaller, more uncertain, wondered if healing was possible. Once every 2 months, I countered. And you call first, every time. No surprises. Fair, Dad agreed. And if I need space, if I'm not ready for a visit, you respect that. Absolutely. And we don't talk about Ethan unless I bring him up first. Mom hesitated, then nodded. Okay. It wasn't much. It wasn't trust, wasn't forgiveness, wasn't reconciliation. But it was a start. We finished lunch. They walked me back to my car. Admiral Grayson, a voice called. I turned to see a young sailor from my command, in civilian clothes, standing nearby. Petty Officer Davis, I acknowledged. He came to attention instinctively. Ma'am, I just wanted to say thank you for approving my transfer request. My wife just had a baby, and being stationed closer to her family means everything. You're a good sailor, Davis. You earned it. Congratulations on the baby. Thank you, ma'am. He nodded to my parents, then walked away. I turned back to find them staring at me. That happens a lot, Mom said. Doesn't it? People recognizing you, thanking you. Sometimes. You matter to them, Dad said slowly. They respect you. They respect the rank. And hopefully, they respect how I wear it. We should have respected it too, Mom said. All of it. All of you. I unlocked my car. I'll call you in 2 months. We can set up another visit. Thank you, Dad said, for giving us a chance. I nodded and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I watched them standing in the parking lot, looking smaller and older and somehow more real than they'd ever seemed before. That night, Ethan called. How did it go? He asked. Better than expected. They're trying. That's good. Right? It's something. Whether it's enough remains to be seen. Fair. He paused. For what it's worth, they talk about you differently now. With respect. With pride. It's 30 years too late, Ethan. I know. But maybe late is better than never. Maybe. I wasn't sure yet. Over the next few months, my parents visited twice more. We had lunch, walked around the island, talked about my work. Slowly, carefully, they began to understand what my career actually entailed. Mom asked questions about command structure. Dad wanted to know about the ships I'd served on. They listened, really listened, when I talked about my sailors, my responsibilities, my challenges. It wasn't the relationship I'd wanted as a child. That was gone, broken beyond repair. But it might become something else. Something more honest, less painful. One evening, after they'd returned home, I received a package. Inside was a photo album Mom had made. It contained every photo of me in uniform she could find, my commissioning, my promotions, my change of command ceremonies. Photos I'd sent, and they'd filed away. Now they were mounted carefully, with captions in her handwriting describing each event, each achievement. On the first page, she'd written, "To the daughter we should have celebrated all along. We're sorry it took us so long to see you." I set the album on my shelf, next to my awards and decorations. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was acknowledgement. And for now, that was enough. 14 months after the ceremony, I received orders for promotion consideration to Vice Admiral. Oh, 9. 3 stars. Commander Cruz delivered the news personally, walking into my office with a rare smile. Congratulations, Admiral. You're on the list. I looked up from my reports. Which list? Promotion board. They're considering you for Vice Admiral. The official notification will come through channels, but I heard from a friend at Bupers. You're on the short list. I sat back in my chair, processing. Vice Admiral meant bigger command, broader responsibilities, deeper impact. It also meant more visibility, more scrutiny, more pressure. When's the board meet? Next month. Results probably within 6 weeks after that. Thank you for the heads up. She left, and I was alone with the news. 3 stars. 30 years after joining the Navy as an uncertain ensign, I was being considered for the highest ranks of naval leadership. I thought about calling my parents, then decided to wait. If I made the list, I'd tell them. If I didn't, there was no reason to mention it. The next 6 weeks were normal, meetings, decisions, problems solved. I didn't think about the promotion board. Thinking about it wouldn't change the outcome. Then, on a Tuesday morning, the call came. Admiral Grayson, this is Vice Admiral Peters. I wanted to inform you personally, you've been selected for promotion to Vice Admiral. Congratulations. I stood reflexively, even though he couldn't see me. Thank you, sir. Your ceremony is scheduled for 8 weeks from now at Pearl. We'll send the formal details through your command. You've earned this, Pauline. Your record is exemplary. After we hung up, I stood at my window and looked out at the harbor. Somewhere out there were ships I'd helped provision, sailors I'd helped lead, operations I'd helped execute. 30 years of service, distilled into 3 stars. Commander Cruz knocked and entered. I heard, "Congratulations, Admiral." Or should I start practicing Vice Admiral? Not yet. How do you feel? I considered the question honestly. Proud. Tired. Ready. Your parents will be thrilled. Probably. She studied my face. You're not going to tell them yet, are you? I'll tell them after the ceremony. Not before. Why? Because this one is mine. I don't want to share it with their opinions or their pride or their attempts to make up for lost time. This promotion, I earned it without them. I want to celebrate it the same way. She nodded. Understood, ma'am. The next 8 weeks passed in preparation. My dress uniform was updated with the 3-star insignia. My staff coordinated the ceremony. Invitations went out to commands across the Pacific Fleet. I didn't invite my parents. I told Ethan, swore him to secrecy, and asked him not to tell them. Are you sure? He asked. I'm sure. They're going to be hurt. They'll survive. This is important to me, Ethan. I need it to be on my terms. He understood. He'd been working with his own therapist, processing the pressure of being the golden child. He was learning, slowly, to separate his parents' expectations from his own worth. I'm proud of you, he said. 3 stars. That's incredible. Thank you. You know, he added, I tell people my sister's an admiral. They're always impressed. Makes me feel like I'm related to someone important. You are someone important, Ethan. You don't need to borrow that from me. I know. But it's still cool. The ceremony was held on a Friday morning on the same pier where I'd stood months earlier after the SEALs ceremony. The weather was perfect, clear sky, calm water, the kind of day that made Hawaii look like paradise. The Pacific Fleet commander administered the oath. My staff stood in formation, crisp and professional. Other flag officers attended, along with commanding officers from across the fleet. When the 3-star shoulder boards were pinned on, when the crowd applauded, I felt something I hadn't felt before, complete. Not because of the rank, though that mattered. Not because of the recognition, though that was meaningful. But because I'd reached this moment entirely on my own merit, without compromise, without needing validation from anyone except the institution I served. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Officers congratulated me, shook my hand, offered respect that had nothing to do with my family or their expectations. Commander Cruz, now executive officer to a 3-star, found me near the end. How does it feel, Admiral? Right, I said simply. Your parents will be upset they missed this. I know. But some moments need to be ours alone. She raised her glass. To Vice Admiral Grayson. May your next command be as successful as your last. We toasted, and I looked out over the harbor at the ships riding at anchor. That evening, I called my parents. Pauline, Mom answered. This is a nice surprise. I have news. I was promoted last week. To Vice Admiral. Silence. Then, last week. Yes. You didn't tell us? Dad's voice joined in speakerphone again. No. Why not? Mom asked, hurt evident in her voice. Because I needed that moment to be mine. Just mine. Without your pride or your guilt or your attempts to make up for the past. I earned 3 stars through 30 years of work you never bothered to understand. I wanted to celebrate that achievement without you. More silence. That's fair, Dad said finally. That's more than fair. We would have liked to be there, Mom said quietly. I know. But I needed it more than you did. Can we? She paused. Can we at least see photos? Can you tell us about it? I considered refusing. But they'd been trying, in their own stumbling way, to rebuild what they'd broken. I'll send you photos. And next time you visit, I'll tell you about it. When can we visit? Dad asked. 2 months. Like we agreed. Okay. And Pauline? Congratulations. We're proud of you. I know. But your pride isn't why I did it. We hung up. I stood on my lanai with a glass of wine I actually drank this time and watched the sunset over the Pacific. My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Saw the photos Cruz sent me. You look like a badass. 3 stars suits you. I smiled and replied, thanks. How's the team? Good. Deployed next month. Probably can't tell you where. Probably not. Stay safe. Always. Love you, sis. Love you too. I set the phone down and thought about the path that had brought me here. The years of being overlooked, the quiet determination, the refusal to let their blindness define me. I'd built a career worth respecting. I'd earned rank worth celebrating. I'd become someone worth knowing, not because of my family, but despite them. And now, finally, they were beginning to see it. Whether they truly understood, whether we'd ever have the relationship I'd wanted as a child, that remained uncertain. But I'd stopped needing their validation. I had my own. The next morning, I arrived at my office at 0600. My new responsibilities included oversight of Pacific Fleet logistics and strategic operations across 13 time zones. The scope was enormous, the stakes high, the work meaningful. Commander Cruz was already at her desk. Ready for your first day as a 3-star admiral? I've been ready my whole career. She smiled. Yes, ma'am. You have. I sat down, pulled up my reports, and got to work. Out there, across the Pacific, were ships that needed provisions, sailors who needed support, operations that required coordination. My job was making sure they succeeded, making sure they came home, making sure the fleet remained ready. It was work I was good at. Work that mattered. Work that defined me more than any family relationship ever could. My parents would visit in 2 months. We'd have lunch, talk about my promotion, continue rebuilding something that might eventually resemble a relationship. But whether they understood or not, whether they were proud or not, whether they finally saw me or not, none of it changed who I was. I was Vice Admiral Pauline Grayson, United States Navy. I commanded thousands of sailors, managed billions of dollars in resources, and made decisions that shaped Pacific operations. I'd earned every inch of the 3 gold stars on my shoulder boards. And I'd done it by refusing to be invisible, even when the people who should have seen me first chose to look away. That was my victory. Not the ceremony, not the moment of public recognition, not their belated apology. My victory was becoming someone I respected, someone I was proud to be, someone who didn't need their validation to know her worth. I looked out my office window at the harbor, at the gray ships preparing for another day of operations. Then I turned back to my computer and got to work. Because the mission continued. The fleet needed leadership. And I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Doing exactly what I was meant to do. On my own terms. Finally. That's where I drew the line and kept it. If this hit home, tap like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs the reminder. Your worth doesn't require permission. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been dismissed by family and had to set a boundary? What finally made you stop proving yourself to people who wouldn't see you? If you served, or supported someone who did, how did recognition, or the lack of it, shape your relationships? What would being seen look like for you right now? After a public reveal like mine, would you reconcile or keep your distance? Why?